When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we're talking about a topic near and dear to my heart. It's about doulas. But more importantly, it is everything you need to know about hiring a doula from a doula. I'm not the doula, as mainly speaking. I actually have a wonderful person, Francie Webb. Let me tell you a little bit about Francie. She is an IBCLC, an international board certified lactation consultant and founder of Go Milk Yourself. She is a mom of 3, an author, and former middle school teacher. She has worked with 1,600 plus parents and provided training to 2,000 plus professionals. And she's trained over 40 doulas and over 40 lactation professionals in her own training called Go Milk Yourself Lactation Training. So Francie and I dig into the important questions of how to find a doula that best fits you. So we talk about things really starting at, you have to think about your priorities. And then from there, you can start to craft the questions that you want to ask your doula. So we go through that. We also talk about some red flags about while you're interviewing your doula. What red flags might there be that you pause and think, is this the right person for me? We're going to talk about some practical things like where to find a doula, how much doulas cost, what to expect about when they should be on call, and backup doulas. So if you're considering hiring a doula, this is the podcast for you. Now, before we get to my conversation with Francie, I always love to give some updates about what's happening at Prenatal Yoga Center. So things are going really well. We've maintained our classes online. We started it back in COVID and we've kept it. So we still have online classes 7 days a week at this point, and it's really exciting. And then, of course, we have our in-studio classes 6 days a week. We've got our baby and me and our baby fingers sign language class. We have all our workshops, prenatal, postnatal, really anything. We're kind of a one-stop shop for pregnancy through parenthood. And it's something I'm really proud of. So take a look at all of that on our website. And if you're in the yoga world and you're a yoga teacher and you're looking for a training, check out our training also on our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. So those are the things happening at PYC. I'm also going to take a moment and ask you, the listener, to please head over to wherever you're listening to this podcast from and leave a rating and review. It helps people find us. And then, as always, I just like to say a thank you for being part of our listening community. If there's a topic I haven't covered or maybe a speaker you think would be a really good fit for Yoga Birth Babies, reach out to me, Deb@prenatalyogacenter.com. I'm all ears when it comes to new topics, new ideas, and new speakers. All right, we're going to take a super quick break, and when we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Francie.
What's up, guys? It's the champ, Sean O'Malley, here to talk to you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to win real money while watching football. Run your game on Prize Picks.
Prize Picks will give you $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code SPOTIFY. That's code SPOTIFY on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play a $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Hi, Francie. How are you?
Hi, Deb. I'm really good. It's great to be with you again.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking like we did a podcast many, many years ago about hand expression. So I'm excited to dive in about a different topic. So thanks for coming on.
You bet.
All right. So let's jump into a conversation about hiring a doula. And I know you actually wrote an article about this it was Elle magazine, correct?
Correct.
You would think I'd know that because you included me on another article around the same time.
Oh, you really did. It was so fun. I got to make that free and low-cost resource guide for pregnant people. That was pretty awesome.
Well, thank you for including Prenatal Yoga Center. So I know, are you doing that much birth work anymore? I know you're an IBCLC. How many births are you doing?
I'm supposed to, and by that I mean I promised myself I would go to 5 births a year. But for the last couple years, it's been more like between 5 and 9 births a year. Like I think I just went to my 8th birth this year. No, I just went to my 7th, and then I've got 8 and 9 in November and December. So I try to keep it in the single digits per year.
Mm-hmm.
So I am doing birth work, but not full time in the way that I used to.
So you're still a doula. I am a former doula, and this is something I know it's near and dear to both our hearts. But I also think the hiring process is really important. So I'm excited for us to dive into that. But before we get to that, I want to learn a little bit more about you and what led you to birth work.
Great. Well, the thing that led me to birth work was giving birth. I was pregnant with my first baby, and I had a friend, a longtime friend who I'd seen at a reunion, and she told me that she was a doula. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And I said, I'm going to call you when I get pregnant. So that's exactly what I did. I got pregnant, and probably shortly after I peed on a stick, I called her and I said, will you be my doula? And she said, Francie, I live in Philly. And I lived in New York on the Upper West Side at the time. And I said, so there are trains, there are buses, there are cars. And she said, you really need a doula in your city. And the fact that I didn't understand that was hilarious, because obviously you need a doula in your city if they're coming to your birth in person. But I got it. So that was the first thing that planted the seed in my head. And I had just had surgery right before getting pregnant for an old injury. And I didn't want to have surgery again. So I became obsessed with how can I avoid a cesarean? And I hired a doula for my first baby. And I felt like I had an awesome experience because of her support. And then after my second was born, I was like, I think I'm meant to do this, because I watched her do her job. And then I had a really unexpected birth with my second. And it was like, okay, I'm ready to be trained. And that is what brought me to birth work.
I think the best thing to do before even interviewing a potential doula is for the pregnant person to think about what kind of care they're hoping for and what are they looking for in terms of support. So as that person's thinking about, all right, what do I need for my birth? What are some questions they should be thinking about for themselves before they even think about talking to a doula?
Yeah, I think, the biggest question is going to sound really abstract, but what comes to mind is what's most important to you as you bring your baby into the world? What feels important? For some people, it feels important to be in a specific place or with a specific provider. For some people, it feels important to be treated or communicated with in a certain way. For some people, it's, I'm looking not to be traumatized. So there's something they're trying to prevent or avoid. And then others are more in the headspace of, I'm looking to create something. I'm looking to create an experience where I'm really empowered, for example. And so I think the question is I always tell people, if you and I were sitting on your couch and there you are holding your 5-day-old, and I say, so how was your birth? And you say to me, it was everything I ever wanted. Ask yourself what that would look like if you got the birth that was everything you ever wanted. And the most popular response when I ask people this question is, well, I have absolutely no idea. And I'm like, perfect. But then once you get people talking and I say to people, what feels important to you, or a more general question like that, I'll get things like, they may have trauma in their past from different experiences with medical providers. They may have had close friends or family members who've had their births go certain ways and they don't want theirs to go that way, or they do want theirs to go that way. Some of them may have had long journeys to getting pregnant. So it's really just like have a conversation with yourself and other stakeholders in your life around what feels important for me to have had in my birth after the birth. Like, what was it like for me? What did I get from it? Because it's an experience that you will never forget. Your doctor, your midwife, the nurses who were there, perhaps even the doula, if they're an extraordinarily busy doula with many, many years of experience, like they're not going to remember it even close to the way that you remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going to walk away with an experience that really works for you, what are the things that feel important? And I think most people have something to say about that.
And then how would you turn that into questions for the doula to make sure these things, I'm just going to rattle off some things. They want a birth center and they have a specific midwife and they literally is pulling things out of the air and they want a water birth and all these things that are not really available in New York City. And, and they, what else? And skin to skin, hopefully that's for everybody, but skin to skin is super important. And they want their partner and their sister there. Like, how do you then turn that into questions?
Great. I think, so what you want to find out is who the doula is. Who are they as a human being? What their personality is like, what it's like to be with them, how it makes you feel, how they communicate and how you communicate with them. Like who they are is important. And then I also think how they do their work is important. And so I would think about questions in these categories. So, hey, you're a doula. How do you work with people? Again, I kind of feel like I'm coming up with general questions at first that come to mind, but it's really what I'm pointing to is like you want to have a big takeaway. Like net, what do you hope to gain from this interview with this person or this conversation? It could be a quick phone conversation and you're trying to decide whether to interview them. But how do you work with people? How do you help people get what they want? And, you know, what do I get from working with you? What exactly are the services that you provide? Tell me what it looks like. And I think it really can help to have doulas give you examples of how they've supported people through the type of thing that you're looking for. Like if I say to my potential doula, you know, almost 13 years ago, I do not want to have surgery. I just had surgery. I went through 3.5 months of physical therapy. I just don't want to go through it again. Will you help me avoid surgery? Now, it wouldn't be very smart for that doula to say, I can prevent you from having surgery.
In fact, that's a red flag. I'm going to jump in. If those kind of promises are a red flag.
Yes. If anyone's acting like they can guarantee you a certain kind of experience, they're lying, at least to themselves.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when I say that to my doula and she says to me, here's some things that I can do to help prevent the likelihood of a cesarean birth, then she's got my rapt attention. I am listening carefully. And it's like, I'm listening for specific things. I'm listening for a solution to my problem, essentially, which we talk about a lot in entrepreneurship. Can you solve the problem of I might have a cesarean? The answer is no, she cannot. Can you help decrease the chances that I'll get a cesarean? It's possible. It's quite likely, actually, that she can. And the research tells us that people are less likely to have a cesarean when they have a doula. And, you know, if I'm also saying to her, tell me what you actually do, then I'm going to get concrete examples. And particularly someone with, you know, who's experienced at least a few births, they're going to say, so I had a client in this situation and here are the things that I tried and here was the result. Mm-hmm. And so they're able to communicate specifically the difference that they've made for people and that they can make for you. And if they're not able to communicate that specifically, then you get to choose if you're okay with that. For me, that would be important.
Yeah, I really like the idea of going in with some answers in your mind that you want them to say. I did that when I was interviewing midwives because I had a home birth and I had some specific things that were super important to me. And one of them was, what would happen if I'm having a postpartum hemorrhage, like after just delivering, either maybe just delivered the baby or maybe it's the placenta just happens to come out. And one midwife was like, there is already Pitocin and I'm massaging from internal or external, and somebody is calling 911. And that is the answer I needed to hear for my safety. Another midwife's like, well, I have some herbs. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, Like, so it's not that it's a wrong answer, but it was a wrong answer for me. And so I feel like I'm hearing you say the pregnant person needs to know kind of what they need to hear in some ways to know, is this the right fit? And maybe they don't have exactly that, but I feel like having an idea of the support they want is going to help them also as they're having this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. What do I want this person to say? That's a great question, Deb.
I know that sounds weird. It does. It sounds a little contrived, but I do think like if they're saying, how are you going to support me? I think they should know, how do you want to be supported? And is this person going to offer that? Sorry, I totally jumped on your bandwagon there, your fire, and I started over speaking.
That's brilliant. I love it. Absolutely.
All right. So they're starting to make a list. They're interviewing. And are there any other questions you think that the pregnant person should be talking to the doula about or interviewing? So we've got, what are they going to do for them? Are there any more specifics that you think we should dive into?
So for some people, it feels important to find out how many births the doula has attended. And sometimes we'll see inquiries like you and I have both seen over the years. We're on various email lists or groups where people are saying, hey, I'm looking for a doula with at least 100 births or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I've found over time, I've seen some of those get even more specific. I'm looking for a doula who has had at least 25 births at NYU Hospital with this one specific practice. I'm always like, that's so interesting that they think that someone who checks those boxes is going to be the perfect fit for them. Mm-hmm. So what I tell people is like, ask about the person's experience. And their experience isn't just how many births that they have attended. It's also, what have they done in life? Like there are many people who come into birth work. I came in as a teacher, and I've always told people the work that I do in doula and lactation care is very similar to being a teacher, particularly since I worked with students who had language-based learning disabilities. I would say, I tell people, it is my job to understand exactly where you are in your journey, what's important to you, what the gaps are, how you're feeling about it. It's my job to discern that. And then it's my job to find out where you want to be and coach you or support you through closing the gaps between where you are now and where you want to be, which is exactly the same thing I did when I was a middle school teacher. And so coming in as a teacher with my first few births, if someone said, I want someone who has at least this much experience or this number of births, totally fine. Absolutely their prerogative. And also doesn't really capture, I am somebody who has met people where they are and helped them close gaps to get what they want in a system that is often against them for years, for like a decade and a half. And so I think asking the person what their experience is, like getting to know them as a professional, is really helpful and important. And then for some people, it's important to get to know them as a parent. Like, have you had babies before is sometimes important to people. Have you given birth before is sometimes important to people. But I think no matter how the specifics look, the question of like, tell me about how you came to doula work, what you did before, and what your experience has been like so far as a doula, like asking a question like that can really capture everything that this person is bringing to the table.
I like that. It's funny that you asked about have they had birth, because I actually feel like my doula work fell apart once I had kids because, well, I wasn't in the situation where I could just, like what I did like maybe another 5 births after, maybe 6, but it was hard for me because I had to drop everything, spend time with the family, and then come back to my family. And my kids were young and they didn't understand that I might have been up for 24, 36 hours. And when I came back, I couldn't just step back into mom role. So I have the utmost respect for those that can continue that way, but it did not work in my lifestyle.
Yep. Totally hear that.
Yeah. So what are some red flags that people should keep their eyes at? And I know it might be different. Like my whole postpartum hemorrhage question might not be bothersome to others, but are there any things that people should be like, ooh, this is making me pause for a second?
Yeah. So what you're asking is, what are red flags that could come up, like things that the doula might say or not say or not do that would be a red
Yes.
flag for the
Yeah.
person giving birth? Yeah. Again, if they promise you some type of experience, like I promise you that it will go this way, or I have worked with your doctor many times, that's great to hear. But if someone's like, I know how to play this so that you get what you want, like that's not taking into account that we never really know how birth goes. And in fact, I would listen for the person to acknowledge what they cannot control. Like as a doula, when I'm consulting with someone, I think every single time I say to people, I say to people, I have absolutely no idea how your birth is going to go. And I can promise you that I will be by your side to support you through the forks in the road and working through whatever comes up to maximize the chances of you getting an experience you're excited about and proud of and happy with. And so all of that is to say, I think it's a green flag if somebody says something like, I cannot promise you anything. I cannot guarantee anything. Like there's like an authenticity and almost like a vulnerability that's inherent there that I think is really reassuring in the end. Mm-hmm. But I think a red flag would be if someone is very rigid in any kind of way.
Give me some examples.
Yeah. So if someone says, if you give birth at that hospital, you are going to have a C-section.
Yikes.
Or if somebody says, the only way you can have the birth that you want is with this one particular midwife. I guess it's more about like if they're communicating information like that, but it's in a way that's kind of know-it-all or righteous, then that's a red flag. But if the person is saying to you, look, I just want you to know I've worked with your practice many times, and some of the things that you're asking for are actually not how that practice operates, then I don't know. I'm like,
no, I hear you. I completely understand because I've had to toe that line with my prenatal yoga students because I can't say like, sometimes they say a doctor and I'm like, oh, like, and I can't say that to them, but I could say, what are some of your priorities or things you're hoping for from this care provider? That practice doesn't always practice that way. And you may want to inquire more about that. So I have to be careful because I also don't want to insult them because they might be like, no, I like this practice. And then you have to just say, well, it's a conversation you should have with your care provider about how you align.
Totally. Exactly. Yep. That makes perfect sense. Yep. And I think it would be, I think it's a red. So here's the real red flag, Deb. The red flag is if the doula thinks that she's right about everything.
Yes.
And I think about that. Like I also train professionals. I've trained doulas and lactation professionals. I run online courses. I have a weekly free video training that I provide only for my colleagues. And so I've spent time with more than 2,000 professionals over the years. And any of us can tell when someone thinks they're right. And when I train professionals, one of the very first things that I say is, do you have a window near you? Great. We are going to take everything that we think is right and we're going to throw it out the window. And we're going to throw being right out the window. Because that's not going to help us if we think we're right. That's not going to help us really reach people and be with them no matter what they're dealing with. And so if you're having a conversation with them and you basically, if you don't feel great being with the person, if you don't feel heard, if you feel like they're being kind of controlling or forcing in any way, any kind of convincing, if they think that their way is the way, I think that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Because a doula's job is to be there for you. And like who you are right now is distinct from the person you'll be while birthing this baby and after birthing this baby. And the way that you're feeling now can be very different than how you're feeling in 72 hours. Like it's a roller coaster growing and having a baby. And so you want someone who will be with you exactly as you are, no matter what. And so I think if they're anything other than compassionate, then that would be a red flag. But there are some people who want very specific, like I'm thinking of one particular client who I worked with and we loved working together. And she was just like, look, I'm having an induction. I'm 43. This is an IVF pregnancy with an egg donor. And I am super anxious about this pregnancy. And I just need someone who is going to talk me down when I get upset or anxious, but I want to do everything that my doctor says when my doctor says to do it. And so if you are somebody who is coming to the process with like very specific, like I know exactly how I want this doula to work with me, then tell them exactly how you want them to work with you. And then let them let you know if they're the right person for the job. But otherwise, like outside of someone who wants these very specific like iterations of doula care, I think it's really helpful to listen for that person to be compassionate and to for you to feel heard. Does this person make me feel heard? If I do not feel heard, I am not working with that person.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I also think it's about, this is just my own, as you're talking, I had just kind of images in my head. As the pregnant person's talking, is the doula really listening, or is the doula more pushing their thoughts and agenda?
Yes, agenda. That's so big. I just get shocked so many times when people say to me, oh my gosh, I feel like you're the first doula I've talked to who hasn't had an agenda. And whenever someone asks me that, we're usually at a point in the conversation where I can say, can you tell me a little bit more? Like, what are the agendas they have? Because
I guess the agenda is like, how can I help you? That should be the agenda.
Exactly.
How can I show up for you?
Exactly. I mean, I tell people like the way that I frame postpartum doula care to people is I'm going to show up at your door and I'm going to say, what do you need the most today? And you're either going to tell me, or I'm actually just going to ask that question in my head, look around and do it for you. But like the only thing I'm there to do is serve you and make a difference for you in that 3-hour period. And that's exactly how it should look when you're working with a birth doula. It's like they are there to serve you, period.
Yes, not to toot their own horn. All right. On that note, we have to take a break. And I have so many questions to ask till we come back. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Blinds.com is kicking off the savings early with Black Friday mega deals all month long. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can even handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for just one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Get up to 45% off site-wide and a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Okay, we're back. So I think we have a pretty good idea of where someone should start, really kind of reflecting on themselves. From there, thinking of their priorities, writing it up, actually having the conversation. But before someone can actually talk to a doula, sometimes they are not sure where to find them. So where do you suggest people even finding a doula?
Yeah, perfect. I found my doula on Google.
There you go.
I found her on Google. I Googled New York City doulas. So I hope this isn't happening anymore, but at the time that I was pregnant with my first baby, my OB handed me a list. I said, listen, I want a doula. And she's like, that's great. And I said, but I want a cheap doula. I was super anxious about spending money. I was like so scared of having a kid and how I was going to be bleeding money once I had a kid in New York City. And she hands me this list. This is Dr. Bradley. I'm sure you have known
I've done many a birth with her, yes.
There you go. And Dr. Bradley hands me the list. And
I can imagine. I already know this was, how old's your first? Like 12?
Yep.
I already know everyone on that list. Yeah.
I well, here's the problem with the list she gave me, Deb, and this will not surprise you, is that they all have like 13-ish year olds because they were all pregnant or on maternity leave. So I call, she's got 8 doulas on the list, and I call.
But I bet they're expensive. If I feel like I know that list too.
Yeah, exactly. Because I said to her, what should I expect to spend? And she goes, well, doulas are $500 to $1,500, which I think that was a pretty common range around that time. And
I think a little more, because I was still doing my doula work then. And I think at that time I was about 2,000.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, she obviously, she may not have known exactly how much a more experienced doula would cost, but she said, I think you'll spend between $500 and $1,500. And I was like, well, how do I find the 500 doula? How do I find the $500 doula? That was my only question for her. And she said, well, you can call the people on this list. And everyone I called was either on maternity leave or going to be on maternity leave. And I was like, how can these people be pregnant? They need to be available for me. This is rude. And so I started Googling, and I, found an agency, and I called the agency, and the woman who owned the agency talked my ear off for 45 minutes. She gave me a few tidbits that were really helpful for something I was going through. I was on bed rest because my baby was measuring small and they didn't know what else to do at the time. And at the end of the call, she said, so are you interested in doula care with me, or were you calling to speak to someone else? And I said, actually, I was calling to speak to Carla. And at the time, Carla was the doula who worked with her, who was $500. So I found my doula on Google and worked through an agency, which means that the doula made some of that money and the agency made the rest of that money. And there are a number of fantastic there are actually fewer agencies now in New York. There are a lot more that are like referral programs. I don't even know what they would call themselves, but it's basically a company that exists just to refer. And so all of that is to say, you can go through a renowned group that has doulas. So it's a group practice, or it's a company that will connect you with a doula. You can also ask around from some of your favorite providers. So your OB, your midwife, your doctor, if you have a physical therapist, chiropractor, massage therapist, yoga teacher, things like that. Like, please, if I were going to the prenatal yoga center right now, which I remember doing on my due date with this 12-year-old, and I was like the most pregnant person there. And I was like, it's finally my turn. I'm at the yoga class and I'm the most pregnant person here.
You're the leader of the pack. That's what you call it, the leader of the pack.
Exactly. But I was so mad that I was still pregnant. I was so mad. But so, I feel like if someone goes to yoga or Pilates or any kind of like exercise class where there are other people who are having babies or have had babies, I think that's a great place. I also find that Google is a great place to look. And speaking as a business owner for a moment, I have, been working to improve the possibility of people finding me on Google through SEO optimization and Google My Business. And so I think that Google is getting even better over time as a place to look.
So you touched upon the cost 12 years ago. And I know this is going to differ depending on where someone's listening to this from. So somebody in New York or San Francisco may have a different price. Someone more in the middle of the country or wherever, like the prices are going to be different. So do you have a broad spectrum of prices that people can expect?
Sure. I think, it's a massive, massive range. I actually do know a few newer doulas in some locations who are charging as little as $300 for a birth right now. So I would say one can expect to spend somewhere between $300 and multiple $1,000s. And I say multiple $1,000s because you can go
play 6, 7, 8,000. I know for some of them.
I was going to say like under 10, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that the kind of mode, like the most common price range that I have seen these days is kind of between, depending on location, a city like New York, it'd be like $2,500 to $4,500. But where I live now in Richmond, Virginia, for a more experienced doula, it's going to be more like $1,200 to $2,200, something like that. So it'll be less.
I want to throw a suggestion in for listeners. So when I started, I had a mentor, Terry Richmond, who's been on my podcast many times, still my friend, doula for both my kids. And I was really fortunate that she was and still is a very experienced doula. But I started with, 3 free births. That's what I needed for my DONA certification. And then I slowly built up. But while I was charging very little, because I had very little experience, I had Terry in my back pocket that when I still remember my first posterior birth and I'm like, what is going on? I called Terry. And so it was so fortunate that while I was a nice cheap doula, because I was new, I did have a mentor who was able to help. So that might be something for those looking for a less experienced and cheaper doula. They may have a mentor, because that is huge. Because honestly, if I didn't have Terry to go to, I probably would not have understood what this birth pattern was meaning and then how to help them through that. Because each birth is different, but there are similarities that you learn from birth to birth. And there's also issues that come up and you're like, oh yeah, I see this pattern. This is probably this. And then we can do this with the body to adjust it. But again, I would not have known that without someone clarifying it for me.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I am not someone who is afraid to hire someone who is newer at the specific thing that they're doing, because someone in training is really, really eager to do a fantastic job.
Yes.
And if they're the right fit for you, they're going to have a huge research network, or at least they're going to have either a mentor or like a rich network of people who can support them. And speaking as someone who has trained a number of doulas over the last few years, which I told you I'm not currently doing, but I trained doulas from 2021 to 2023. I mean, there are people who are, if you will, hot off the doula presses who I would hire in a second. And then there are some people who have been doulas for 20 plus years who I would not have at my birth if you paid me for it. And it's really like, it's just about, is that person a fit? Is that person a match? Like when Carla came over to our apartment to meet us, my husband sat through the meeting with her, and he would put it that way too. I sat through it, and she got on the elevator and I looked at him and I said, I want to hire her. And he goes, great. And I was like, what's your opinion? He's like, I didn't even need to be here. You'd already decided that you love this person, and I can tell you love this person. So like, this is the one. And she always remembers that she got the phone call confirming that we were hiring her when she stepped off the elevator. Because I was just like, we have to book her now. Not only is she the $500 doula, she's awesome. And to this day, she is like just very, very dear to me as a colleague and as someone in our family's life. But I think that, so your question was like, well, what you pointed to, that's huge, is that the number, again, if the person is less experienced as a doula or more experienced as a doula, it's about how you feel with that person. And it's also about what does that person have to draw upon in order to support you? In some cases, that person might have medical experiences. One of my favorite doulas who I have done a lot of lactation trainings with, she is a nurse, and she was a nurse for many years, and she quit her job at a major New York City hospital last year and is doulaing now and preparing to become an IBCLC. So, that's something that she has. There are people like me who I know a number of doulas who are former educators. I know some doulas who haven't had any babies yet and are just phenomenal project managers, like super organized and able to just like see things from a bird's eye view that I'm not so great at. And so it's always about, what is it like to be with that person? And also, does their skill set and their kind of confidence set, if you will, match what your needs are?
All right, so let's, first of all, I completely agree. Let's talk about what should the expectant parents expect in terms of the doula being available and on call and having a backup doula.
Great. I saw somebody post in one of my groups yesterday. I'm thinking of taking a few births next year. I haven't been taking them for a while, but I don't want to have to find a backup. And there were some real circumstances about it's hard to find backup in her area. But she said, how do I frame in my contract that the person's not going to have a backup doula? And my first thought was, you don't. That's where I think I'm right as a doula, I guess, is that moment where I'm like, no, you must have a backup doula.
What if they're sick, or what if their family is sick and they should not be showing up? Like,
yeah. And especially since COVID, I mean, if I had a kid who woke up with a really bad cough, I don't know if it's safe for me to go to somebody's birth. Like, I'm going to be there with a pregnant person and also with their brand new baby. I don't want to pass anything on to them.
yeah.
And so I think we think about these things more than we used to. But the expectation is really that there will be a period of time when the person is on call for you 24/7. And when you're the client or the potential client, you may not be thinking about what that looks like. But from the doula's perspective, what that looks like is their ringer's going to be on 24/7. They are not going to travel very far when they are on call for you. So my contracts state that I'll be at the person's birth within 2 hours. So I'm going to a girls' weekend in November. I'm on call for someone, and the place where I'm going is an hour and 40-minute drive. And I don't feel great about that. So I have a whole bunch of plans in place and have communicated that with the client. You know, the person's going to be on call, aka they're not going to travel. They are not going to overbook themselves. They're going to be able to drop everything and come to you, period. Like, even if they have other clients due at that time, they are available for you within the time frame that they shared on their contract. Their ringer is on, you know, they're sleeping with their phone next to them. But I mean, that I'm not going to go have 2 cocktails when I'm on call for somebody because I need to be completely present.
I do not miss being on call. You like, as you're talking, the anxiety is like immediate. Like I remember my phone next to me. I would check so many times. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. Did I not turn it off? I would, if I was teaching, I would check in with them before I started class. Often somewhere in the middle class, I'd peek over, and then right at the end, like sometimes I would carry my doula bag around with me. Like it was really like there. I was so, I don't miss that. Yeah. Wouldn't get theater tickets, wouldn't do like, everyone knew I'm on call.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to spend money on a concert you'd be really excited about. You know, you're not going to invest in something when you're on call at that time, or maybe you are, but you're then going to have to pay a backup for that time if the person goes into labor then.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, my husband knows when I'm on call, you know, before we go to bed, I'm asking Alexa to call Francie Webb on her cell phone. Make sure the ringer's on, because I'm at least keeping it across the room. And I'm somebody, especially now as I'm like beginning the whole world of perimenopause, I do not sleep with my phone in the room anymore. And so it really works that I'm not a full-time doula, because I only bring my phone up when I'm on call for these occasional people. And so when you're on call for them, like when my doula is on call for me, that my doula is going to drop everything and come to me, period, no matter what is happening. And also if they've got stuff going on with their life, like they've got childcare to work out, they've got, you know, other things going on in their business, whatever it is they're up to, I'm not going to hear about that stuff much. They're just going to show up for me. They're going to be there completely for me. And for most people, the on-call period, I used to see people having their on-call period be 37 to 42 weeks.
That's what I used to be. Is it not that anymore?
Well, I switched mine at one point from 37 to 38 weeks, 38 to 42, just because it was so rare that I ever saw somebody go in like this 37th week. Like it was at least as rare as the person who went at like 32 or 33. But so there's some people who do 37 to 42. There's some people who do 38 to 42. Then there's some circumstances in which the person giving birth is not going to go to 42 weeks. Like maybe there's going to be an induction at 39 or 40, and they already know that. So the on-call time, like I had somebody who was at risk for preterm labor ask me to shift my on-call window, you know, earlier. And I've had someone who's like, I know that I'm going to say yes to an induction at 41 weeks. Would you be willing to go on call, you know, from this time to this time instead? So that is something that can be adjusted. But in general, there's an on-call period that doula usually uses, and you're going to follow that. The second thing, there's your second question, what can we expect what can we expect in terms of backup? I mean, I'm going to ask the doula, how do you handle backup?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that they are confident about that. They can even sound right about how they handle backup, because it's so important for me to know that not only will I have someone if they're sick or their kid is sick or there's a family emergency, or, sometimes there's an emergency in their home or with their car or something. I mean, I had a doula I trained who I absolutely love, who's a close friend of mine, who was on the way to a birth, and inexplicably, she started vomiting profusely when she was like 20 minutes from the hospital.
Oh, geez.
And I immediately helped her find backup. And there was no other sign of illness. Like, it was just kind of out of the blue, and she felt totally fine after that, but she wasn't going to go in that moment. So you just never know when something is going to happen and you're not sure if it's okay for you to go. Or I have a colleague whose husband threw his back out, and she had a bunch of kids at home, and she's like, I just can't leave right now. I cannot leave. Like, our kids will not be cared for right now.
One thing I think they could also ask is, how do they communicate with their backup? Because one thing I used to do was, after our kind of big meeting of finding out their birth preferences and, really what their vision was, I would type up the notes, because I'm a little type A, and I would type up the notes, and being a little type A, I would send it to the client to make sure I interpreted everything correctly, because sometimes I also couldn't read my own handwriting. So I wanted to make sure that I got it right. But that meant that I then had everything in a document that I could send to my backup. So I don't know if that's typical. How do you typically see things?
Yeah, I find that backup doulas and primary doulas tend to communicate in some way, maybe not as detailed as that. I have a Google Doc and I share it with the backup. But sometimes I don't share it until very late in the game. That's a good question. Let me see. I mean, I would just expect, if I'm the person giving birth, I don't want to have to communicate to this backup doula anything that I want in my birth. I want all of that information already passed along. And so I think that's an excellent question to ask people is, how do you handle backup? Who are your backups? Do I get any say in who the backups are? Because I always tell people, I'm going to choose, I have a small number of fantastic doulas in my back pocket who I use for backups. After we get to know each other, I'm going to choose the one who I think is the best fit for you. And around the time of our second prenatal, which is somewhere between weeks 35 and 37, I'm going to connect you directly with that backup. And if you do not feel fantastic about that person, let me know right away, and I will pass you on to the very next person who I think would be a great fit.
I like that.
And there have been a couple of times where someone said to me, I'm not sure this backup is the person for me. And I just trust them and I find them the next person. So I'm always in the background confirming backup, but their job is to make sure they feel great about that person. And I've got some people who are like, I want to meet this person. I want to meet them in a coffee shop or in person. Some people are, I'd like to get on the phone or on FaceTime or Zoom with them. And then I've got some people who are like, nah, I'm good without meeting them. I trust you. I hope you can be there, but if it needs to be them, that's fine too.
This has been so helpful. I feel like the listener right now has really solid, not just questions, but things to then think about and really contemplate about their individual needs. And it starts back with, and I feel like so many of the episodes do, what do they want for themselves? And that's that's how to pick a doula, that's how to pick a care provider. I mean, it's just so much about going back to being authentic to oneself. We're going to take another break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you would like to offer new and expectant parents? And you have so many hats you wear: doula, parent, lactation consultant. I mean, there's so many. So I'm very curious. Former teacher. Let's see what you come back with. We'll be right back.
With Uber Reserve, good things come to those who plan ahead. Family vacay? Reserve your ride as soon as you book your flights. To all the planners, now you can reserve your Uber ride up to 90 days in advance. See Uber app for details.
Okay, we are back. So what is your final tip or piece of advice you would like to offer new and expectant parents?
Well, at the risk of sounding corny, does anyone even say corny anymore? I don't know. My advice is to have a team. I think that many, many people arrive at the moment in their lives where they're expecting a baby for the first time. And, they're great at doing it themselves. They are, they've been successful and effective in different areas of their life. And now they're like, oh, okay, well, I can do this myself. And I think that when you're having a baby, it really works to have a team of people of your choice who really work for you. The way that they are, the way that they communicate, the choices that they make are a match for what you're looking for. And so creating a team of medical providers and support people and friends and family who can be there for you in whatever capacity you choose, that's going to make your experience go well, whatever that means to you. Does that make sense?
That is great. I like that because asking for help is very important. Having a team to support you is so important. Where can people find your work?
Great. People can find my work on Instagram at go_milkyourself. That is my handle. Also at go-milkyourself.com. And I'm on LinkedIn and in a bunch of Facebook groups that many people who are listeners are probably also in. And I think those are the place. Yeah, that's where people can find me.
I looked at your website recently. It looks great. And for those that are like, go milk yourself, let's just take a hot second just to explain. Francie started, well, I don't know if you started, but like one of the things I remember you as was about talking about hand expression for breast milk. So I'm assuming that's where that came from. Because you have a book saying, go milk yourself, right?
Yep. Through trial and error and trial by fire a number of years ago, I learned that my hands were at least as good as a machine. And so I dumped my pump and started hand expressing milk. And that is where my new career began. And now I have the opportunity to work with people through insurance covered lactation support. So it costs people $0 to work with me. And I can provide, in some cases, unlimited lactation sessions for them, primarily via telehealth. And that is something that I love doing because I get to make a difference for people feeding their babies. And I'm also such a fan of having conversations with people about how to set themselves up for a birth team that they feel great about, because postpartum going as well as possible usually starts with getting set up ahead of time. It is way, way easier to ask for help, ask for support, set up your team before a baby comes than it is to think about those things when you're actually holding said baby.
Yeah, and we'll do another podcast we already planned about lactation, which I'm excited to do. Francie, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed talking to you.
It's been fabulous to be here with you. I'll say I'm pumped that we got to be together. And it's been really fun talking about how people get to choose their doulas. And I'm so excited to hear from listeners what they got from this episode and what difference it's making for all of you as you go about choosing your team to have your baby.
Thank you so much.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
Congrats! You're pregnant! Now, what do you do during the next 9 months? You need Preggy Pals. We educate and entertain expectant mothers and those hoping to become pregnant. Each episode features pregnant moms-to-be as well as experts. Together, we explore topics aimed to embrace pregnancy and empower women as they give birth to their babies. Subscribe through your favorite podcast app or say, "Hey Alexa, play the Preggy Pals podcast." And be sure to visit newmommymedia.com to check out our other parenting shows, Newbies, Parent Savers, Twin Talks, and The Boop Group. Preggy Pals, your pregnancy, your way.